Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. I think we're going to get started because it's a bit of a short session this afternoon. But thanks for joining us for our discussion on imagining a fully open access future. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sara Bosshart, and I'm the head of open access journals at the Royal Society of Chemistry, where I look after our open access journal portfolio and open access more broadly across the organization, including our commitment to transitioning all of our portfolio to open access by 2028. Open access is clearly at the forefront of many of our thoughts. All you have to do is look at the conference agenda, and you'll see that there are countless sessions on open access taking place, from the OSTP memo to OA workflows to the economic impact of OA on publishers and libraries. I'm sure many of you were in this room earlier today for the session on global perspectives on open access, where we got to hear about some of the initiatives in South Africa, Australia, and in Ohio State. In this session, we are going to take a little bit more of a local focus. We're going to be looking at how different types of institution in the US particularly are approaching open access and how they imagine a fully open access future. More specifically, we're going to address how panelists are approaching changes in the open access landscape, what unique challenges they face, and how they see the open access landscape evolving over the next few years, and what this is going to mean for their institutions and communities. To do this, I'm joined today by librarians representing 3 different types of US institutions. So Portland State, a public research university, Harvard University, a private Ivy League research university, and Swarthmore College, a private liberal arts college. Representing Portland State University, we have Jill Emery, who is the collection development and management librarian and a professor at Portland State University Library. Jill has over 25 years of academic library experience, has held leadership positions in ALA, ALCTS, ER&L, NASIG, and UKSG. She serves on the Project Counter Executive Committee and is a member of the Charleston Advisory Editorial Board and the editorial board of Insights, the UKSG journal. From Harvard University, we have Yuan Li, who is the university's scholarly communications officer and director of open scholarship and research data services. In her role at Harvard Library, Yuan leads a dynamic and forward-looking team dedicated to making Harvard's research available and accessible to the world, encompassing both research data and publications. Prior to her tenure at Harvard, Yuan served as a scholarly communications librarian at Princeton University Library, where she led and managed the library's pioneering efforts in scholarly communications, innovations, and reform. Representing Swarthmore College, we have Ann Houston, who is Director of Libraries. Ann joined Swarthmore in 2022 and was previously Dean of Libraries at Lafayette College. She's held positions at Smith College, the University of Virginia, and Tulane University. She is also past chair of the Oversight Committee of Lever Press, an open access digital monograph press, serves on the board of governors of the Hathaway Trust, and is active in the Oberlin Group of Liberal Arts College Libraries. At Swarthmore, her initiatives include planning for a major library renovation and advancing the library's role as a partner in liberal arts education. So we're going to start by having an intro from each of our panelists, who are going to share some of their insights on how their respective institutions are adapting to shifts in the open access landscape and how they see this future evolving. We'd then love to hear from all of you, representing an even broader group of institutions, and we will so open up the floor to questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts and also any experiences you'd like to share with the group today. So to start, I'm going to pass over to Jill, but I'm going to ask the same question to each of the panelists. Could you each please start by telling us just a little bit about your institution, where you're at currently with open access, and what a potentially fully open access future would look like for your institution, including what changes would need to happen to accommodate this future?
All right. Yes, it's on. Hello, good afternoon. Good to see everybody. So Portland State University is what is classified in the United States as a Research 2 institution. So not top tier research, but like the next tier down. And right now we have currently around 15,000 FTE. I'm currently spending a quarter of my budget on open access and open access initiatives. My budget is just slightly over $4 million. So I'm spending about $1 million. Where we see things going is we do see continual movement, especially of journals and even, I would say, books into scholarly books into more of an open access market. That said, I don't see us ever being at a place where we're totally, fully, completely open access. I think there's going to continue to be relevancy for print publication and for us to get print resources. One of the areas where we're going to need to continue to develop and continue to have sort of collections done for us and access to things like gray literature, which is open access, but is not widely or fully indexed in a way that we get full access to it in a manageable way individually. So we're probably going to still need some structures where we're purchasing resources that provide that material. We do understand there's a cost to publishing. I will say, for me, one of the biggest game changers was Project Muse coming out and announcing their Subscribe to Open coming up in 2025. For me, that was like a tipping point, because that's the university press market, and the university press is moving into that realm. Really indicates to me that we are making the switch from doing subscription-based content support to really being more supporting the production of open scholarly content going forward. But what we're going to need is a realization of publishing. And I think, the university press models are really good. The Subscribe to Open is going to take us there in a price point that most of us can accept. Where we're going right now with commercial publishing, commercial scholarly publishing, is just unsustainable. And I'm already at that breaking point. I'm already canceling stuff. We walked away from one major deal last year. I'm cutting a good $80,000 out of another contract this year. We're going to continue to carve out money from that commercial scholarly publishing realm, just because we can no longer support the costs and the cost structures that they're coming at us with. When you tell me a single journal is going to cost $22,000, that is ridiculous. I'm sorry. We can't sustain that, and we're not even going to try at this juncture. So what we really need is for there to be more collaboration, especially with the commercial scholarly market, in developing a price point that really works for all of us. And so I'm going to hand it over to my colleague.
Thank you, Jill. My name is Yuan. Thank you so much for joining us today, and it's my great pleasure to be here. As you probably already see on the program, my affiliation is still Princeton, but I have just very recently moved to Harvard. And so today I will be speaking from my new role at Harvard Library. So I don't know how much, I only be there a couple months. I don't know how much I can tell you about Harvard or Harvard Library. You probably know more than me, but I'll try. So Harvard, as one of the most prestigious institution in the world and one of the oldest institution in the United States, it is known for its exceptional academic program, research, world-class faculty, and a long history of producing leaders and innovators in various fields. And I do want to point it out that on July 1st of this year, Claudine Gay was appointed as the 30th president of Harvard University. She is the second female president and the first people of color to lead Harvard University in its 386 years. So that kind of really represents the historical stride towards a more inclusive, equitable, and diverse higher education landscape. For Harvard Library, we have around 800 staff across 27 libraries. We serve faculty research students from Harvard and across the world with over 200 million digital and physical items. Martha Whitehead is our vice president for Harvard Library and University Librarian, and Roy Lyson, librarian for Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Under her leadership, we take advancing open knowledge as our strategic direction. We are really fortunate to have such a leadership and a vision that can put open into our strategic priority. Currently, Harvard is has been always a leader in open access movement. Right? In 2008, the Faculty of Arts and Sciences passed the first ever open access policy. Since then, the Harvard-style open access policy has been adopted across almost 100 institutions and policymakers around the world. And we are continue investing in open infrastructure, like Core, like ORCID. We have our own repository, currently hosts more than 56,000 items and have more than 59 million downloads. And we also develop open infrastructure, like a Harvard Dataverse, that for specifically research data for people, not only for Harvard affiliates, but also for the world to share and curate, to preserve their data, research data. And we also have the involved in the collective open access development. And I wanted to make a note that Harvard, we advocate for non-APC model, like publishing model. We don't think APC model is equitable, such as transformative agreements. It has a transformative there, but it's not really transform anything. It's a transfer problem from one end to the other end, and then we don't think that's an equitable model. So we are heavily involved, invest in a non-APC-based model, such as Diamond Open Access, Collective Open Access models. So for imagining a fully open access future, I would think, that's my kind of meditation time, I imagine that make me happy. It's really, it's gonna be it's healthier, happier, and a more equitable, inclusive, and diverse ecosystem. Every stakeholders in that ecosystem will be really doing what they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to be doing, what they designed to do. Like researchers will be much happier, especially the researchers who have less fortunate, who has less privilege to access information. The information will flow much freer, and then the collaboration, global collaboration will be broader, and then the scientific progress and the innovation will be accelerated in a much faster speed. And the founder will be much more happier because the fund that they invested in will create more impact, right? Whatever the research funding that for in the medical field will heal more people, and then some policymakers will use those research fundings to create a more reasonable impact for policy changes. I think a publisher will now to do exactly what they're doing, which is providing publishing services. Right now, a lot of them call them content provider, but from my own opinion, they are not a content provider. The researchers are, and then they are really producing the content, and then they are publishing. They are publishers, so they provide publishing services, right? Coordinating the peer review process, take care of the production services, and then deliver the content for researchers. Of course, those services are valuable, and we need to, and we must pay them for those services. And then librarians will be also much happier because we don't have to really scratch our head and saying which one we need to drop off, we need to cancel, and then this faculty is not happy or that publisher is not happy. So, and then the information going to be all free, although we still will take our keep our responsibility, which is information steward, right? We're still doing a lot of information organization, discovery, dissemination, preservation, evaluation, and we'll do that services, and we'll still do transactions. How are we gonna help this information, that the payment pay the services, but we're going to have a much healthier and a happier relationship with publisher, right? Not face to face, but hopefully it's a partnership and hold hands, like both work together to support faculty and researchers to make this information, make the research and flow better. In terms of what changes we that need to kind of make in order to make the fully open access world too. I don't think there's any radical changes, but I think right now what we're doing is on the kind of a right track, and we need to do more in terms of changing or maybe adjusting our values. As a library, right, we need to incorporate open and equity into our values more so that we don't have to struggle, don't have to have a hard time when we want to justify invest into a small open access journal. We don't have to have a difficult time to say no when we encounter some that not open-friendly publishing contract or publishing agreements. When we work with publisher, when we do a negotiation. And we need to kind of rethink how we're gonna set up a value and stand for it. Another thing I think we can do more is about education, right? Not only educate our faculty or researcher students about what's happening in the open world, right? This is a lot of new models coming up and the new policies, and we need let them know what is happening, what their options are, but also and have them be aware that they are in actually a driving seat too, right? Their efforts as counts. And in addition to educating our faculty, students, researchers, but also internal staff. A lot of this, as I said, is a lot of nuances. And even internal staff that we might not necessarily getting all the ideas, getting ins and outs, and getting how this works and that model, how that model works. So, and I heard some of the stories from publishers as well when they wanted to try new OE models. And then one of the biggest challenges is to get their internal staff on board as well. Like this is our own also challenges as well. We need to educate ourselves, internal staff. The third thing I think we can do more is about the education. So now is about the engagement. We need to work with more with a large library community, and not only library community, but also groups that with a shared values or missions, like the open repository community, right? Like a core. Like Spark. And then also need to work with publishers very closely, right? For the small publishers, we need to support them to try different open access model. And then with big publishers, we need to be able to say no when we need to, and we need to work with them and tell them what exactly the model that we think that will work for us and that is more equitable. That's just in a nutshell. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, is that working? It is working. Yeah. Okay, great. Like Sarah said, I'm from Swarthmore College. Prior to Swarthmore, I was also for 5 years at Lafayette College, another small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania. So I'm drawing on my experience both at Swarthmore and at Lafayette in my remarks. So like many small colleges, the academic programs at both of the institutions I've been at are liberal arts oriented, but students are increasingly choosing to major in STEM. And both schools have engineering programs, which is a little bit unusual for liberal arts colleges. So we are seeing the movement to STEM that is seen at the large institutions in a slightly different way. It's more our students are voting with what they choose to major in. At Swarthmore, the library's funding is very strong, which I like to point out just because it is somewhat unique. It's not true of many institutions our size. So we have some of the same limitations of other small colleges, but we are lucky to have a really good library budget. Our faculty, we have 173 faculty, and while they, tenure track faculty, and while they are teaching focused and very strongly teaching focused, many of them do significant research. And the institution is proud of the quality of research, especially as it enhances the student experience, but support for research can very much become an afterthought at an institution like ours, and it can be put on the back burner, which is very frustrating for faculty, and I think it can also be a retention issue for faculty. We've lost faculty because they have opportunities at bigger institutions where they have more support for their research. So I think where we're at in the library with open access, we have a repository with about 12,000 items. We have no open access policy for faculty, so it's really the library going out and building the repository. And really, advocacy for open access has kind of fallen off the radar. It doesn't get talked about a lot. We do have several read and publish agreements, Cambridge, ACS, Royal Society, and some others. But I should point out that we didn't really seek these out. They were part of renegotiated contracts through PALSI, our state consortium, but we didn't go necessarily looking for them, and there's a lot of question that we have about whether they will actually be used. It's too soon to say, but whether our faculty will really take advantage of them, the published part of that is really a question. And we spend maybe, depending on how you look at it, there's a lot of ways to measure it, about 10% of the library budget on things that support open access in one way or another. We don't fund APCs through the library. The provost's office does that, but there's not a lot of interest that's really come up about that recently. So the interest in open access on our campus is almost entirely coming from the library right now. And to me, the exciting thing about a fully open access future, in addition to the things that Jill and Jan have talked about, is that it could help raise the visibility of our scholarship and really reopen faculty research as an important topic of conversation for the institution. Because we really need to talk more about it. We need to be having these conversations. So that's especially true in the humanities, where a conversation about open access monographs needs to extend beyond the library. Faculty are generally unaware of how much more use open access monographs can get than published monographs, than non-open access monographs. So I think, can the movement to open access support the values of the institution, including its desire to sort of get the research out there and a commitment to diversifying scholarship, which is another thing that open access can really help with. So I think, what we need to do to get there, to me, the biggest question is really the question that is sometimes referred to as the free rider problem, that this idea that there may be some institutions that don't pay in the end, but end up benefiting from open access. And I think, the question for me is how can the cost be borne in an equitable and fair manner across institutions, including smaller and less well-funded institutions? And what would be some models for doing that so that it's fair and it's balanced, but that we are contributing and not just free riders to the open access knowledge that the bigger places are paying for. And I don't think we've really done a lot of talking about this, and I'd really like to know what that looks like. And I'd love to hear from publishers about why smaller institutions are important to their economic models, if they are. So is it important that 100 liberal arts colleges contribute to this, or do you really just need one Harvard and a couple of our ones? Why are we important? I mean, it's important to us because I think it for us to not contribute says that research is not important to us, and in fact it is. So how do we get there? And I think having this conversation with our administration is something that we need to do more of. Our administration is not really talking about it, and at this point, I'm a little bit almost afraid to raise it, because in the absence of a robust conversation about open access, I don't necessarily want them to know that I'm spending 10% of my budget on open access, because I wonder what they'll say. Why are we doing that when other people will fund that? So, it's interesting. Swarthmore has money, but it was founded by Quakers, and they hate to spend money. And so sometimes it's interesting what we will not spend money on. And the final point I'd like to make is just how do we ensure, if we're going to have easier access to research outputs, for undergraduate students, how do we make it so that they can take advantage of that, not having to go through paywalls, but not confuse them and make it more complicated for their research. So we spent a lot of time building discovery services. And what is the role of those in a fully open access future? What is their role as we go more and more towards open access? How do we ensure that our students are finding good research? And can AI be used for good to help with discovery? Or will it just give students a lot of fake citations? So how do we harness AI for good? So I will leave it at that. And thanks for doing Q&A.
Thanks. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot that we could unpick here. So I'm going to open up to the floor for any questions or comments or thoughts or experiences, and I'm going to come with the mic, so I'll come around.